I will never consent to the plundering of my clergy and my nobles. Fine actions had earned them their privileges. The King of France must conserve those privileges for them. Louis XVI. France made the 18th and 19th century world's revolutions, and gave them their ideas, to the point where a tricolour of some kind became the emblem of virtually every emerging nation. Eric Hobsbawm, in The Age of Revolution. Independent of the privileges which history has bestowed upon certain strata of society or nations, the Declaration indicated man's emancipation from all tutelage and announced that he had now come of age. Hannah Arendt, on the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Louis XVI of France and his queen, Marie Antoinette, have been painted variously as scapegoats of the Revolution and active agents in the demise of the Ancien Régime, who swamped the country in debt and refused to justly share the burden. His grandfather and predecessor, Louis XV, was hardly a better ruler, plunging France into expensive conflicts, particularly the 7 Years' War on the North American continent. In his reign, European relations had changed dramatically following the ascendance of Protestant Prussia. This meant that the traditional adversaries of France and Austria had to forge an alliance. This alliance was sealed by the marriage of the Archduchess Marie Antoinette of the Habsburg monarchy to the Bourbon Dauphin and future king, Louis XVI. To begin with, their relationship was difficult and distant, which is understandable, given how much was riding on it diplomatically. Marie Antoinette was only 15 when she married, and it took 7 years before she bore Louis an heir. Of course, during this time, Louis's seeming disinterest in his bride led to a lot of rumours and gossip, a sign of things to come. It was to have grave consequences for Marie Antoinette, because it was traditional for the king to take an official mistress, and without someone in such a role, she effectively fulfilled both a queen and mistress position, which was extremely bad for public relations. Meanwhile, Louis decided to intervene in the American Revolutionary Wars on the side of the colonials against the British, who, in the form of England, were France's historic rivals. French arms, the result of Benjamin Franklin's persistent lobbying, helped to win the Americans' victory, but at the cost of soaring debt. Against the backdrop of a flourishing Enlightenment intellectual climate around Paris and rising middle-class wealth, the monarchy increased taxes on peasants, labourers and merchants, while maintaining the exemptions for the nobility. The goals of the aristocracy and the bourgeoisie had fundamentally diverged, and any incentive to their continued cooperation evaporated. Ironically, funding a foreign revolution had bred an insurrection of their very own at home. Tensions between the people and the Ancien Régime reached boiling point in the summer of 1789. The capital was fizzing with latent revolutionary fervour, and on the 14th of July it exploded in an all-out assault on the symbol of Bourbon tyranny, the prison fortress of the Bastille. At the time, only 7 prisoners were being held there, but that mattered little. There were just under 200 casualties, with 98 fatalities on the side of the attackers, and a maximum of 9 defenders. This was certainly no bloodless coup, and much more would yet be spilt before the revolution's turning was done. As news of the events in Paris spread across France, peasants reacted with joy and, as it happens, bloodlust. Up and down the land, the manors of the aristocrats were ransacked and expropriated, the nobles driven away or rounded up and executed. Past cruelties were repaid in kind, and lands were seized from those who had reaped their income into the hands of those who cultivated them. Louis XVI had called the Estates General, a parliament representing the nobility, clergy, and everyone else, at the beginning of the year in an attempt to solve the debt crisis and political tensions that this had exacerbated. By the summer, the Third Estate had split off and formed a National Assembly with the aim of remaking the Constitution, which they swore to in the Tennis Court Oath. 3 weeks after the Bastille's fall, it declared the abolition of feudalism, liquidating the political power of the aristocracy and the church in France. On the 26th of August, 1789, the National Assembly published the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It was a decisive moment in world history, wresting France from the chokehold of the nobility and clergy, and founding a nation based on popular sovereignty. The Declaration contains tensions between Rousseau's idealism and a more sober Lockean liberalism. Rousseau had a great intellectual influence on the revolutionaries, who were keen to put his principles of the general will into practice. This is balanced with the libertarian ideas about unrestricted freedom and property rights. Its preamble references a supreme being, distinguishing the Declaration from the Americans' invocation of God and creation. This shows the influence of civic deism, an Enlightenment idea that recognizes the social benefits of providential reverence without the moral dogma of the Church. The 10th article says that no one should be disturbed on account of their religion, but unlike in America, this is qualified with the condition unless it threatens the stability and integrity of the nation. Britain's romantic poets and artists embraced the French Revolution as a great victory for the people. Figures such as William Wordsworth, Robert Burns, and William Blake were inspired to create works in response. Political radicals were quick to welcome the news from France, and it spurred their demands for franchise reform and land nationalisation. For them, it would open the door to greater democracy and equality. Counter to this, Edmund Burke was highly pessimistic about what it could achieve, condemning the revolution in strong terms as the politics of envy and foolish destruction of tradition in favour of a strong state.